Welcome back to part 2 of this tutorial on how to photograph and edit a time-lapse using your digital SLR and Adobe Lightroom. I use Adobe Lightroom CC Classic. Now, I use these days a Nikon D7500 with a Tokina 11 to 20mm lens. But when I was really into time-lapse photography, I'd actually bought a second camera, much cheaper, because back then I had a full-frame Nikon D750. And the camera I had was a Nikon D5500, very mid-range, and I bought a second-hand Tokina 11 to 16mm f2.8 lens. Now, the reason I bought the Tokina 11 to 16 was when we're shooting time lapses, we're trying to get as wide a field as possible, because like I stated at the start of the video in part 1, is that most cameras we shoot basically in a 6x4 format. But when you're doing time lapses and you're going to upload them to YouTube or whatever, you've got to crop them down to 9x16. So you actually need that width, because you're actually going to lose a bit of the bottom and a bit of the top. I didn't want, because I had the full frame camera, I didn't want to be chewing up heaps of photos with my full frame camera. So the Nikon 5500 and the lens all up had only cost me about $800 odd, which was a fairly good investment for shooting time lapses. Because what people don't realize is you're taking around 24 to 30 frames a second to shoot a movie. So the quality, the sharpness doesn't really have to matter. You don't really need a full frame camera or a top of the range prosumer crop sensor camera like this camera here, the D7500. It's quite easy to buy a second-hand camera like the 5500. Now it's the latest model is 5600. You can actually pick them up on eBay fairly cheap, second-hand, and there's companies out there also that will sell these cameras with a 1 year, well, if you're looking at Nikon, with a 1 year Nikon warranty. So at least if something goes wrong with the camera within the first year, you're still covered. So that being said, we'll jump in now, and I ended up taking 372 photos in the time that I left the camera run. And this will give me, when I'm shooting at 24 frames a second, when I'm actually going to render this video, roughly 15.5 seconds of movie. I did say in part 1 that when I bring the photos into Lightroom, I actually convert the format from RAW to DNG. But I got to thinking that for this exercise, because some people aren't too familiar with converting to the DNG format, I've just left them all in RAW. So I've already imported them into my Lightroom catalog, and they're there waiting for me to edit. So now we'll actually go ahead and edit. And like I said in part 1, I won't choose the first photo or the last. I'll choose somewhere in the middle. So I shot 370. So around the 160 mark, I'll choose that one photo and I'll edit it, and I'll show you how I go about applying all the settings that I've done to it across all the photos. So join me now and we'll go into Lightroom and we'll keep going in this tutorial. Okay, so you can see now I've got quite a lot of photos here. They total 381. But like I said, there was only 372 photos that were any good, that were part of my time lapse. Now, when we recorded this, I actually did state that I put my hand in front of the lens so I knew where my time lapse started. So we can see here, there's my hand, there it is there. So any photo before that, I can just go ahead and delete out of Lightroom because they're not needed. So we'll delete them there, yes. Delete them from the disk. Okay, so now we're left with 372 photos. So we got 3, 6, 8, I'll get down, 150, 170. Okay, so I'm choosing the 170th photo to edit. Now we go from the library module to the develop, and I have a preset here for my Tokina 11-20. I'll click on the preset. There it is there. Now, the first thing I want to do is make sure that my horizon is straight. It should be, because I've actually leveled it before I took it. And we can see here that the horizon is straight. Now, before I go any further, like I stated, I've actually got to crop now the image to 16:9. So this is 16:9. And what I want to do is actually put the horizon, the 1/3, so we've got 2/3 of cloud, 1/3 of water. If we bring it too high, I might actually go a little bit less because there's a lot of clouds there. So this looks pretty good. Normally when I would be doing this, I would actually put the horizon on the 1/3 in the bottom, give myself 2/3 of clouds. But we'll just go below that 1/3. This looks quite good. So we like that. We click done. Now, in the Adobe profile here, this preset for the Tokina is set to landscape. There's a few there you can choose: Adobe Color, Adobe Landscape, Adobe Standard. Adobe Standard is a very flat profile, so I really don't use it too much, because if we look here, it's quite flat. Adobe Vivid just punches it too much, and when you're making a video, you don't want too much saturation in your photos. So we'll go back to Adobe Landscape, or you could choose Adobe Color. Now I use Adobe Color, the profile, when I'm shooting all when I'm editing, my wildlife photos, because I don't want too much sharpness and too much saturation in my images. But for landscapes, I actually quite like the Adobe Landscape profile. So we'll choose Adobe Landscape. Now, this looks fairly natural, but I've got the white balance set has shot. Now I can actually click the eyedropper here, and when you're using this eyedropper, what you've got to remember is this eyedropper is colorblind. It's not looking at color. What it's doing is you're telling the eyedropper where a neutral gray area of the photo is. So if you find an area that is neutral gray, you click on it, and you can actually look up in the top left hand corner, and you will see that as you move this eyedropper around, that your preview will change, and it will actually show you what the photo would look like if you actually chose that spot. Now we're quite fortunate here because we've got clouds, grayish clouds, and we've also got a boat here on the water that, although it's white, some areas are grey. So what I can do is I'll actually just select one of the clouds here. I'll click on it. Wow, look at the change. Now it's actually telling me that the color temperature is actually 7,300 kelvins, which is actually quite warm. If we toggle back to what it was before, see, this is very blue, way too blue for me. We come back to what we had chosen. This looks much more natural. Now, I could see what it would look like with the boat. We'll choose a little bit of a grey area here. Now, when we're choosing grey, we don't want a darkish grey. Okay, so now that's saying 6,000 kelvins, but I'll actually just slide it up a little bit more. I don't want to go all the way up to 7,000. I thought that that was a bit too strong. Now that looks much better. So now we'll go ahead and we'll edit the photo. Now, I'm not going to touch the blueness in the sky at the moment because that is a bit quite strong, but I'll get the photo correctly exposed and then we'll go ahead and do the rest. So we'll leave the exposure alone. The exposure looks quite good. What we'll do is we'll touch the blacks. Now, this is a Windows PC, and there are shortcut keys to Lightroom. So if I hold the Alt key and then touch the slider in the black, you can see I've got a white screen. And if I go to the left, I've got all this color here. So I actually want to get a white screen. That's it. So now I've got a white screen. So now it's actually telling me that my blacks are not clipped. I do the same for the white. Now for the white, we just want a black screen. So if I go ahead all the way to the right, you can see there's color there. Now I keep going down, back until that's it. Now that's telling me that my whites aren't clipped. Now I leave the shadows alone for a moment. Now I go to the highlights. Now we can just see here, some of the clouds, I can't see too much definition. So I'll just grab the slider and slide it down a little bit. And I've actually got a little bit more definition in the clouds. Now if we use the shadows, I'll lift the shadows just a little bit, just to compensate for the bottom here a bit. Now that looks pretty good. Now I can just add a little bit of dehaze. Now one thing you have to be careful with dehaze when you're shooting a time-lapse is that because it is multiple photos, if you add too much dehaze or too much clarity to your photo, what it's going to do is it'll look chunky. So the clouds, instead of being nice and smooth, they'll look like rough as they're going along. So the edges will be too defined. So be very careful when you're using clarity or dehaze. So what we'll do is we hold the Alt key again, click on dehaze, and as soon as it comes up, now we can see here on the screen, it's coming up and we're at 21. Now if I bring back to 0, double click to bring back to 0, that's too much. So I'll take it just to about 10. This will just give me a little bit more definition in the clouds. The clarity is set to 14, which is fine. Now, because of the preset on my lens, I've got saturation set to 17 and the vibrance set to 10. Now, one thing I tell people, your saturation covers every single color on the screen that you can actually think of. Vibrance, though, controls basically your primary colors, RGB, sRGB, red, greens, blues, and all that. So it's not going to touch blacks, it's not going to touch whites. Whereas saturation, if you've got blacks in there, it'll actually saturate the blacks a little bit more. But the thing is that I'm got 17 points on the saturation. When I'm doing the vibrance, you've got to make sure that you don't go over what you've actually saturated, because if you add more vibrance than you've actually added saturation, you're actually going to change the color definition of the color that on the screen. To show you that, to show you what I mean, let's look at the screen and I'll actually up the saturation, I will up the vibrance, and you will see how the blue sky changes color from this blue to something totally different. So we're at 10 now. Now, if I take it all the way to 8, it's at 80 now. You can actually see this blue is very different than this. And it's very evident also in reds and greens. So this is something that you have to be very mindful of when you're editing, not just time lapses, but any type of photo. Now I did say that to me that sky was a bit too bluish. So we go into HSL here, which is hue, saturation, and luminance. Now I don't touch the hue, I'll just grab the saturation. This little slider here, I will click on it. Now you can see there's all the color ranges here, and we could actually slide along each little color. But Mother Nature doesn't give us independent colors. All these colors are mixed in together. So it's much better using that little slider, pointing it, clicking on where you want it to add, and either increasing saturation or decreasing it. And today we actually just want to decrease some of that very strong blue to make it look more friendly. So we're going up here and we're going to go into this very dark blue here, and as soon as we touch the mouse, the slider disappears. But if I scroll down, that's it. So now I'm down to 15 points, and it's actually just touched the blue. But what we've got to do, when we touch saturation, we normally also touch the luminance. The luminance is basically the intensity of the color. So when we desaturate a color, it can look like a watercolor. And this is why some people, when they're photographing sunsets and all that, if it's too strong, a pink or an orange, I normally tell people, just desaturate the color a little bit. But don't forget to counteract that with adjusting the luminance, because if you don't, the color will look quite flat. So now we're actually going to go into the luminance, grab the toggle switch and come back roughly in the same area, and we've just upped it just that fraction. Now on the saturation it was -15. On the luminance it's +11, which is about even, which is what you're doing. You're reducing the saturation, so you've actually got to up the luminance a little bit to bring it back to an even keel. So this looks quite good now. Now we can look at the detail. Now if I wanted to add a little bit of definition to the outside of the cloud, if I press the Alt key and come into the masking here, into the sharpening, you can see now that I'm only adding sharpening. If I go all the way to the edge here, this is all the sharpening I'm adding. So I'm just going to go to about halfway, and that's it. I don't need to adjust the noise reduction. I'm shooting at ISO 100 in daytime. There should be no noise at all. And we can see that if we actually click on 1:1, even if we click on 2:1, there is no noise in these photos. So that's it. I'm quite happy with that. So now what I do is actually I've got to apply everything that I've done to this photo to the rest of my photos. And this is how I do it. I come back in the library mode and I come down here on the timeline. Now, the reason I've gone into the library mode is that so I can actually see all the photos very quickly. And I can reduce the thumbnails so that it will be very easy to select all the photos. So I'm down on the timeline down here. I select my photo, right mouse click, and you can see here, see the develop settings? So I come down here and I go copy settings. Now it's going to ask me, what settings do I want to copy? Well, I want to copy the treatment and the profile, my white balance, all the basic tones, which I've touched. I haven't used the tone curve, so there's no need to click on it. I've touched the texture, the clarity, the dehaze, the sharpening. I've adjusted the color. I didn't use a brush, so there's no need to click them. I didn't use noise reduction, so I can unclick that. Lens correction I did use. I didn't use any of the transform. I will leave this effects on. The process version of calibration I will click on. And because I cropped the image, I'll leave that ticked as well. And I apply copy. Now I go back to the first image, scroll down to the last. Now all the photos are highlighted. Now I just click on, I don't have to click on the photo, I just click on the, sorry, I've come back onto my timeline and I click on develop settings. Now I click paste settings. And we can see up the top it's saying pasting all the settings. So this will actually paste across all the editing that I did on that one photo to my 372 images. Now, what some people do is actually highlight all their images, then click on one and edit that one image. The problem with that is you're taxing your computer, because basically you're editing 372 photos at the same time. So there's no need to actually really tax your computer. Just edit one photo. Once you've got it down pat, go into the library module, select all your photos, come down onto your timeline, and then just select, paste those settings across. And there you go, they're all done. So we go back up the top here, and it does take a little bit of time, depending on how quick your computer is, for all the thumbnails to regenerate. Once they're all done, then we can go out of the library module into the slideshow panel. Now we have to highlight all the photos in the timeline for this. Okay, so we select the first image, we scroll down, and holding the Shift key, we select the last image. So now this has selected all our images, 372 of them, and we go over to the slideshow panel on the top right here. Now Lightroom created this slideshow section mainly to do slideshows. So like, for example, if you went overseas and you got a couple of hundred photos and you want to turn them into a movie, this is how you use them. You made a slideshow through here. We're going to use this section to make a movie. So Lightroom doesn't come with time-lapse presets. You have to find them on the internet. So a few years ago when I got into this, I found 3 presets. They are royalty free, they're not owned by anybody. I have a 15 frame per second preset, a 24 frame per second preset, and a 30. The 24 and the 30 frame per second presets are standards when you're making movies. The 15 frame per second one, I was mainly using sometimes when I was doing a slow-mo of the Milky Way, so that instead of the movie just taking 10 seconds, it might take 15. I will put them into a folder on my website, and I'll put the link down in the description where you can download these presets and use them for yourself. And I will show you now how to import them into Lightroom. Now, it's not a big job. All you have to do when you're downloading is create a folder on your computer. I store all my computer programs that I download off the internet that I buy, because a lot of these programs now, they're just online. So I store them in a specific folder, then I just reinstall whenever I have to reinstall Windows. So I'll show you now how to import these into Lightroom. So what we do, we come up here to user templates. Now, your box, if you haven't done anything before, will be blank. But you can see here, I've already got the 3, but I'll show you how to do it now. So we right click on user template and we click on import. Now, here we actually go looking for where these presets are. Now they're in my computer programs, in graphic programs, and I have Lightroom templates here. You can see I've got different templates I've already bought and downloaded, but these are the ones I want, the time-lapse preset templates. Now you can see I've got the 15, the 24, and the 30. So all I do is I highlight the 3 templates and I click import. Now I'm not going to import them because they're already in Lightroom, but this is all you have to do. So we cancel out there. So now what we do before we start anything on the right hand panel here is we click the 24 frame per second preset. Now up here on the top right, if it hasn't been clicked yet, it has zoom to fill frame, so you always click that. We don't want anything else. See, if we click on stroke border, it gives us a little border. We really don't want anything over here. In the layout, we don't want anything. Now in the overlays, the only one we really want here, we're interested, is watermarking. Now I watermark all my videos, but I normally don't use Lightroom here to watermark my videos. The reason being is that if you've seen my videos, I actually use a video editing program where I put an intro to the video, and in this program I actually have my watermark. I can control where the watermark goes. So if I'm doing a tutorial and I'm talking and I'm also showing a video, I mightn't have the watermark where I'm talking, but I just add the watermark where the bits and pieces of the video is, just like in today's video. If we wanted to have a watermark in this video, some people like having a watermark. I like having a watermark in my videos and my photos. I know people say in photos getting a watermark out is fairly good, but it's still a deterrent. For videos, taking a watermark out of a video is so much harder. So I put a watermark on all the videos that I do to stop people using my videos without me knowing about it. Now, what I do is, because this is in Lightroom, all the presets that you've made in the exporting of your photos to watermark your photos, these will all show up here if you want to add a watermark. Now for this exercise, we'll actually put a watermark, but normally if I was doing my time-lapse through Lightroom, I would not be using a watermark here. I would actually be putting the watermark when I use my video editor to put the watermark in down there. The reason being is that sometimes when I do these videos for YouTube, the video gets cut up and you can see I'm actually talking on the video, so I wouldn't have the watermark while I'm talking, but I would have the watermark when I'm actually showing parts of a video. So it's much easier to control where I have the watermark. So we'll go ahead and we'll put the watermark. So we click on watermark. Now you can see here I've got many watermarks, so we'll actually choose the Facebook watermark. It sits in the bottom left hand panel here, you can see, and it's not a distraction, but it still shows that this is a video that I created. Now, we don't need backdrop, we don't need tiles. Now music here, if you're wanting to add some music to the video, you can, and this is where you would put it. And all you would do is you would click on it and so click add. And you can see here that I've got a bit of free music here because I use a program called Cyberlink PowerDirector. So these came with the program. So this is where you would just click on one of these and add it to your timeline. Well, I'm not going to do that today for this video, so we go cancel. Now, we don't touch anything down here. This panel here, the slideshow mode. You only use this if, like I said before in the video, if you're doing a real slideshow with photos. If we click on here, as soon as I click on slideshow length, it's showing 17. If I bring it down, it's showing the minimum is 1 second because this is, Lightroom is thinking that you're actually making a real slideshow, not a movie, you're making a slideshow. So the slideshow technically is a movie, but it's going to show 1 frame per second instead of our movie, which is 24 frames a second. So I'll just come back up here, my preset, and I click on 24 frame per second preset. And you can see down here now, it's actually all grayed out. So we leave it alone. Now, the last thing you can do down here is the quality. So if we click on quality, we have draft, standard, or high. Normally what I do is I might make a draft version just to see what the video looks like. Today though, we'll actually just click on high. It's going to take a while, but I've already done this editing once. It's already rendered, so once it actually starts rendering this time, I'll just show you what the actual video looks like, all the work that we have done. So we select high quality. Now we come over to the bottom left hand panel here, and this is where we export our video. We click on export. Now, if you can see here, the video presets, you have quite a few of them. You have 480 by 270, and if you were doing just a draft version, this is what you would be using, just a very small pixel one, so you can just see what it looks like. I'm not doing that. I'm going to select the 1080p at 16 by 9 ratio. Now this is the 16 by 9, of course, is the standard widescreen format that everybody uses these days. This is what your phone records at, 16 by 9, so this is what you use. The TVs use the same ratio, so this is what we use. And 1080p is the standard for all the videos that I do. So everything that I record, whether it's on my phone or if it's on the computer, everything is recorded at 1080p so that the quality stays the same. Whatever video I do, wherever it's been taken, the quality stays the same. So we select 16:9 at 1080p and we call it whatever we want. So you can see here, this is the original one, Moving Clouds 01. So we'll just call it Moving Clouds 02, and that's it. Now, when I click save, the video is actually going to start to be rendered. So we click save. And if we look up here in the top left-hand corner of Lightroom, it's saying exporting the slideshow has a video. So, like I said, I've already got a version of it, and here it is here, and we'll play it. And it runs for 14 seconds. So here you go. So this is it. You can see it is actually quite nice. We've got clouds moving along. That's it. Now, did you notice that when I shot this, if you've actually watched part 1 of this video, when I actually did the video at Dolly's Rocks, we had clouds coming through during the video. And if you look here through it, there, can you see that there's quite a bit of shadows because clouds went over the sun, and then it just gets brighter, gets darker again. Look at that. I actually photographed a seagull flying through. Dark, 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 dark. And then right at the end, it gets bright again. And you did notice that at 24 frames a second, we've got a very nice cloud movement across the sky. Now, don't be surprised. Sometimes when you're photographing clouds like that, if you have layers of clouds, you might have one set of clouds going, let's say from left to right, and you might have another set of clouds which are might higher or lower than that set. They'll actually go the opposite way. So it's actually quite nice to watch. Now, I did say when I actually made this video tutorial at Dolly's Rocks that it was very windy. It was blowing at around 20 odd knots. There was a bit of noise in my microphone because of that, but you can see in the waves it was very choppy. So I hope this has helped you how to edit a set of photos and to render them into a time-lapse using just Lightroom. Now, you can see what this movie looks like now, this time-lapse movie looks like now. I am going to render this set of photos using LRT time-lapse, and what I will do is at the end of this video you will actually see this one, and I'll put a description in the video saying that rendered in Lightroom, and the next one will just say rendered using Lightroom and LRT time-lapse, and we'll just see what the difference in the videos look like. Now I have finished doing another video tutorial on photographing time-lapse. This one here was used just using our camera and an intervalometer. The camera was fixed in one direction. The video that I've just shot, the tutorial, shows us using this Genie Mini to record our time-lapse. And Genie Mini does is that we can have the camera rotating around. And I shot this near Brighton Park, which is near the Houghton Highway, near the Redcliffe Peninsula, and we rotated around 90 degrees, and we had a very nice time-lapse. Now, when I do the video, I'll actually put the link in here as well, and you will see the difference when we're using the Genie Mini, and the video will also show how I edit photos using Lightroom and LRT time-lapse. So if you're really interested in shooting time lapses, you definitely want to be looking at getting this program. It's a paid program, but as long as you don't use more than 400 photos, you can use this program for free. The developer has made it available for free until you get to 400 photos. When you get to that magical 400 number, you have to pay to use all the special functions and all that. So I bought it a few years ago and it's a great program to use. Lightroom is very good, but when it comes to time-lapse, it is quite restrictive, because if your exposures move around quite a bit, it's very hard to control that in Lightroom. Whereas in LRT time-lapse, if your exposures go up and down, you can actually put in key points and control all that through LRT time-lapse and through Lightroom. So thank you for watching this video. If you like my channel, hit the subscribe button down there and leave me a comment or thumbs up. This is Charles for Charles N Photography.